welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast.
What the fuck is that?
I don't know.
What the fuck kind of intro is that?
I was tossing something out there to see if it sticks. It didn't.
No, it did not. You don't throw.
I'm Ben Matlock.
You don't toss anything out ever again. All right, that's a felony. You committed a podcast crime.
I wanted to accurately depict my headspace right now.
Yeah, don't worry. It comes.
I'm quite
through.
tired.
It comes through every week.
We were having dinner pretty late. That's what it took me a little. I was still pretty close to being our normal time that I hopped on here, but it was a hustle to do that. But we were sitting at dinner, and Tara's like, "Oh, is it your week this week or Ben's?" I was like, "I don't fucking know." I said, "I hope to God it's Ben's."
Well, we'll fuck that up at some point. Where it's like, I thought it was you.
Well, we've got our go-to there. Like, I think we could cover that pretty easily, but
yeah.
But yeah, that's where I'm at. This, like we were talking just before we hit record. This, like, a Tuesday holiday. I got Monday off. I know you didn't, but either way, it fucks you up because it's like you go to work, you get a day off. You go to work, like, where am I? Yeah. Or I had a 4-day weekend. I'm not complaining about that. I wish every weekend was 4 days. Should be, but I have no fucking idea, like, what day it is, what year it is. I don't even know, like, what state I'm in right now. It might be Idaho.
It's disjointing, but I still remember working retail and stuff where, like, your schedule is like week to week. So you'd be like, oh, I'm on 3 days, I'm off 1, on 4, off 1, on 5, off 1. And so it's like, yeah, it fucks you up, but...
Yeah, well, I know we've got a lot of... I've had friends that have schedules like that and clients that have schedules like that. And at that point, you just... What day of the week it is no longer has any meaning to you anyway. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, on some level, that job is like, committing to like, hey, I'm going to like die for the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah. Not shit talking. That's a fucking tough life. Like I said, I did it for a long time. But I'm glad I work at a place that acknowledges holidays now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things, I work for a family business. I've probably talked about that. But I had worked there, and then when I finished college and went through a police academy, funny enough, I left and was doing work more in that like field. It was private security, so it wasn't law enforcement.
It was bounty hunting.
But one of the a little bit of that that was unsanctioned though. That was on the side. It's like DoorDash, but for bounty hunters. But when I came back to where I'm at now, I took a big pay cut. It was almost $1 an hour pay cut, but it was worth it for I wasn't driving. I had like a 45-50 minute drive each way to work, and it was in Columbus. And depending on your shift, you had to pay for parking, so that sucked. So there was that. But the other thing was now I work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. It's your schedule's very much it's the same every week, and it's normal hours. So I get every weekend off. We get every holiday off, and security was kind of the opposite. I felt like I worked every holiday, and that sucked.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be brutal. Just as brutal as this show. This is the Non-Essential Podcast. Every week we tell each other stories, and whether they're good or bad, that's up to you. So this week I do have...
I don't like that. I don't let them decide, because I know which way they'll go with it.
I know which way you'll go with it.
We need a third party judge. We need a third party judge that we can bribe.
The thing is, if you leave it up to us, we'll say it sucks. It's shitty.
Yeah, we're very self-deprecating.
What if instead other people will be like, oh, it's pretty good. They're like, shut up, you don't know. You don't know how little work went into this.
Because I'm very scattered and love to derail things as you're just about to get them on the rails. That reminded me of Gary Whitta. He's written like a lot of... wrote that Book of Eli movie, I think. He's done Star Wars stuff. But he was just tweeting about that the other day. He says he's like that. Like his successes never feel like successes. It's never like, yeah, I did that, or I'm proud of that. but his failures stick with him. And then he says, so it's so fucking weird when somebody comes up, it's like, oh, I love that thing you did. And it's like, no, it sucked. Like, that's his gut. He doesn't say that, of course, but that's like your gut reaction. Or you think, well, but I wanted to do more with it. And I'm like, I so identify with that, except for I've not ever had anything successful like him.
I wonder,
but like even on minor levels.
I wonder how much of that is like like self-deprecations where like a lot of my humor comes from, but like I think it is just psychologically just kind of a defense mechanism of like,
oh sure,
you don't get to trash it any harder than I've already trashed it, you know. It's being a big old pussy.
But it applies to a lot of like compliments. I've been working out and trying to eat a lot better, and I've lost some weight. It's only been like 10 pounds so far, but it's just to the point where people are like noticing.
Yeah. Like, my God, like, I had like,
what's wrong with you? Yeah. But I had like 2 different people today be like, oh, you've lost weight. And it's like, shut up. No, I'm still fat and ugly.
No, I don't know how to wait.
I don't know how to process compliments. Although I kind of even hate that, like, oh, you've lost weight's a compliment, because it's like, yeah, they didn't say body shapes.
They didn't say you looked better. They just pointed out the fact that you look like you lost weight.
And I'm very careful not to equate like weighing less with being a better person or looking better, because your body's your body. You can own it at any size, but for me, it's more of I want to get in shape so that I'm not in shit shape.
Yeah, I'm simultaneously like really uncomfortable with compliments, but if I don't get any, like I'll hate you forever.
Oh, certainly. And that applies. I'm like that with my birthday. Like, it's like I don't want anybody. Like, what do you want to do for your birthday? It's like nothing. It's just another day. But then if I have a birthday and somebody's not like happy birthday, you're like, oh,
yeah, totally, yeah, exactly.
Like, it's a lose-lose.
It's like I'm always like, oh, birthday's not a big deal, but if you forget, I'll hate you for.
Well, that's the thing. I don't even like get mad at the person or like feel bad at the person. You're just kind of like, well, that just came and went.
Yeah, that's very true. That's definitely like, well, I guess you're all grown up now, Charlie Brown.
So yeah, welcome to the No Self-Esteem podcast. That's what we should have called it, because we're very good at that.
It's very true, and this show is very essential despite our best efforts. We are enlightening the masses every week about random bullshit we found online.
I like random bullshit. That's what drives me.
Yeah, and this is pretty random. I threw this topic together on Sunday, which was pretty early for me. So I'm at that like point of like I don't really remember what I wrote.
Yeah.
So we'll just jump in. Various Avitus Bassianus. That's bossy anus.
Yeah.
For those at home.
I think most anuses are bossy. I know mine completely tells me what to do.
I know, yeah. Mine literally dictates every fucking move of my life.
Right.
He was born in 203 AD in a city called Emesa, which is now a city called Homs in western Syria. In his youth, I'm
very relieved you said 203 AD, because with a name like that, if you're like, he was born in 1982, I'd be like, well,
he's your neighbor.
He committed genocide with that name. Yeah.
That was the 33rd president. In his youth, he served as a high priest of the I can't say that. Emsene sun god, Elagabalus. During which time he went by his more well-known moniker, Elagabalus.
Well, we need to bring back some older traditions.
Yeah. Some folks at home who are more familiar with like Roman history and pronunciation might be very upset with me over the course of this episode. Get over it.
I was just
they're dead now.
Thinking like if Kelly still listens to the show, or if she ever did. She's been on it, but if she listens to the show, she's probably flipping out right now. Like,
well, you start your own funny Roman cast, okay? His family, including his mother, Julia Somius. I'm going with Somius. I swear after 3 paragraphs I'll stop with the names. They were hereditary priests of this faith. His maternal grandmother was the older sister to the wife of Septimius Severus, who established the Severan dynasty, which would rule from 193 AD to 235 AD, which seems relatively short to call it a dynasty, but standards were different back then.
Well, I don't know. I mean, everybody says New England, the Patriots had a dynasty, and that was only like 10 years, 15 years.
It's different in football, though. If you win back-to-back, you have a dynasty.
Yeah.
Both Elagabalus's mother and grandmother had raised the child with the goal of him eventually achieving the Roman throne, which I feel like probably everybody did. There was always some bullshit path to the throne that families thought they could
usually murder.
Exploit. Yeah, and it was often murder. And while Elagabalus was preoccupied with his religious responsibilities, they were the ones who kind of put the efforts into his political future. His father, Sextus Varius Marcellus, was a Roman aristocrat from Syria and seemed to be a little more involved in the child's upbringing. However, he would die a few years before his son's political opportunities would present themselves. Septimius died in 211 AD, 8 years after Elagabalus was born. His son, Caracalla, succeeded him. However, Caracalla was assassinated in 217 AD, because this is Rome, bitch. They called...
Well, like we said, there's different paths to political success in Rome. They all involve murder.
Yeah, like,
at some point.
I mean, these guys were called emperors, but they definitely had term limits. They just weren't put down on paper.
Yeah.
The orchestrator of Caracalla's assassination was the next emperor, Macrinus, who served as a Praetorian prefect under the former emperor. He was not a member of the emperor family, but as you pointed out, if you kill the right people at the right time, people just tend to nod their head and agree that you're in charge.
Isn't that weird, though? Because it's like, haha, I committed the worst possible crime. And they're like, well, you win.
To be fair, he orchestrated it. I don't think it was one of those things where there's probably not a lot of proof. But
also, given his job, you said he was Praetorian, whatever. Generally, the reason people don't say, no, you're a murderer is because he probably had some military might behind him. Yeah. And people are like, yeah, I don't want to be murdered, so take it, go ahead.
Elagabalus's mother and grandmother were then sent back to Emesa and began to plot against Macrinus. This initially began with spreading rumors that Elagabalus was the illegitimate son of Caracalla in order to win the support of troops stationed near them. These troops were apparently pretty easily convinced, and Elagabalus was proclaimed emperor by General Publius Valerius Comazone and his troops.
So, what kind of political system is that where it's one military person is I'm killing, and then another one's this general says this other one. It's is it like cards? Who trumps who?
If whoever says they're in charge closest to me is in charge. The Elagabalus was 14 at this time. Soon, other Roman legions deserted Macrinus to join the, quote, true heir. A battle was fought by the two forces in June of 218. Macrinus lost, was captured, and executed. Rome was...
shucks, what a shame.
Yeah. Rome was secured under Elagabalus, and the Severan dynasty was restored. The new, uncontested emperor began the long journey from Emesa to Rome, but he would have to spend the winter of 218 in Nicomedia, which was a Greek town in present-day Turkey.
Because they sound like a company that makes budgetware video games.
Nicomedia.
Yeah.
Yeah, old edutainment shit.
Yeah,
from 90s. While this politicking war was being thrown together for Elagabalus, what maybe slipped through the cracks was just how enthusiastic the boy was about his religious devotion toward his weird sun god shit. During this winter, he began to perform for his god the fantastic rites he had been trained from childhood. He would deck himself out in the richest clothing, draping himself in purple robes, embroidered in gold, with necklaces and bracelets, and a tiara of golden jewels.
Isn't it interesting how many religious rites
Make you
even
Ric
now,
Flair.
especially back then? They're like, well, this religious ceremony requires me to have all the gold and silk and jewels that you can gather.
Yeah.
It's like, it's coincidence. Like, I didn't say it. The sun god wants me to be
wants me
rich.
Flashing.
Yeah.
With flutes and drums constantly playing for him, he found the best way to pass the winter was with frequent orgiastic service to his god.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
so far, nothing wrong with that.
mm-mm.
Maybe he was just really happy he won the war. And, hell, fucking name me a Roman emperor who didn't dabble in some orgiastic service. Well, it turns out he might have been a little bit like this all the time. As Roman troops in Emesa were mostly just amused by his antics in the beginning, because, all the fancy shit and sex probably made for a hell of a show.
Right.
But now that he was emperor, the soldiers were beginning to regret that they made this kind of, flamboyant sex fiend just a top dog of Rome. Even Elegabalus' grandmother was concerned about how he was presenting himself, and frequently tried to convince him that he needed to wear the traditional Roman dress when he entered the city to visit the Senate. She was worried that his typical appearance would be offensive to the people, as it was obviously foreign and would be seen by the Romans as barbaric.
It was like a ripped t-shirt and baggy, like Jinko jeans. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elagabalus did not heed these concerns. He saw himself as a high priest of his sun god before anything else, even emperor. Because his sun god let him have all the sex he wanted. So who are you
Yeah,
gonna
but
serve?
I would imagine your position as emperor would also allow for that.
It would allow
given the number
for
of
it, but
given the number of stories that we've heard already about, like you said, orgiastic emperor.
it would allow. It would allow
I mean,
for it, but it's different when the god himself is telling you to.
Yeah, I guess that's the you could say, like, oh, if I'm an emperor and doing it, I'm a deviant. I'm doing it out of holy righteousness.
If you're the emperor, you got to convince people. If you're a high priest, people, well, they were still pissed, but you don't have to answer to them. He continued to perform his high priest duties to the displeasure of the Roman people. Now, a few ancient accounts describe these religious rites in various extremes. Really depicted it that it was way more than just fucking and partying for the Lord. And they claim that daily sacrifices of noble children and torture were common. With all the fucked and evil emperors in Rome's history, this isn't impossible to believe.
Right.
There's no shortage of maniacs getting into power and using it for cruelty on a massive scale. But it's worth noting that these accounts do come about kind of just after the fact, when everybody already hated Elagabalus. So there's probably a little bit of propaganda behind them.
Yeah.
Another account...
I mean, it sounds like very QAnon stuff, like, after the fact. Like,
yeah. Another account kind of reports the following, which sounds a little more likely to be nearer to the truth when it comes to the sacrificial rites he participated in. He erected a huge and magnificent temple to his god and surrounded it with numerous altars. Coming forth early each morning, he sacrificed there hecatombs of bulls and a vast number of sheep. Elagabalus danced around the altars to music played on every kind of instrument. Women from his own country accompanied him in these dances, carrying cymbals and drums as they circled the altars. The entire Senate and all the knights stood watching like spectators at the theater.
So that's it. Is they just got bored, because that would be like the first like time you'd be like, oh, a festival, and then the next morning you're like, oh,
yeah,
it's again, and then by the end of the week you're like, I'm fucking sick of watching you dance.
Yeah, you're killing all of our fucking animals and you're playing shitty music. Find the beat, god damn it. Of course, Elagabalus was not a natural Roman god. So Elegabalus added him to the pantheon and placed the sun god at the head, demanding that officials call upon the god when they invoke their rights, and even arranged marriages between Elagabalus and the other Roman deities. Back then, they kind of just played with gods the way kids play with action figures and shit.
Yeah.
Romans were far from a one-god society, but Elagabalus's rapid, my god is king shit around here approach was pretty aggressive, to say the least, and sort of showed the emperor's little respect for the Roman people's customs and taboos, which would become very obvious soon. Elagabalus was married several times. His first wife he divorced because she, quote, had a blemish on her body. I'm not sure what the fuck that means, but...
I mean, I know what it means, but I don't know what it means in context
his
of
mind,
divorce.
It's
right.
like, you have fucked everything since you've been here. What's the problem? He then violated the chastity of a Vestal Virgin and married her, which was not supposed to be done as long as the Vestal Virgin was serving as a priestess. Elagabalus would divorce her later for another woman, but after that it said he married 4 more times. So, again, probably, like, if you're a Roman emperor and you were good at your job, they probably would overlook it. He also supposedly had many male lovers. And again, if you're a bad emperor, the Romans would depict as unforgivable. You're the worst fucking monster.
Deviants, yeah.
But a lot of them fuck dudes.
Yeah.
And if you were all right at what you did, nobody cared.
Right, that was kind of one of the famous, depictions of Rome, is just how they all just seemed to just do whoever and whatever they wanted. Yeah. Maybe that's why he was sacrificing the bulls. It's like, they know too much. They've got
the bulls
they got dirt on me. Yeah.
Elagabalus would also wear women's clothing and makeup, which was also seen as kind of societally taboo and inappropriate. One story says Elagabalus once asked physicians to contrive a woman's vagina in his body by means of an incision, and offered large sums for them to do so. This is probably what Elagabalus became most known for. If you search for this guy, you'll get a ton of articles pointing out that, or questioning, was he the first transgendered emperor? But it may not even be true, as it's only, as far as I could tell, this was only noted in one story about him. And as I said, people were trying to paint him a certain way.
Right. Well, especially if he did wear, even if it wasn't necessarily women's clothes, but these robes and dress flamboyantly, you could see how if you don't like the guy, and that happens a lot. You're one of these people that can you believe he wore a dress, and the person you're talking to is like, yeah, I don't care. And you're like, well, but he did this too.
But
he
also
sleeps with
we're
guys.
in debt as a country, and you're like, that fucker. So if he was transgender, not a problem with that. But that narrative was being put out there when their society would have jumped on it and shit on him. So because the truth of the matter was, Elagabalus was just not fucking liked as a ruler. And
which is generally what happens when you become ruler but don't care about ruling and don't fucking do your job.
Usually when your mom and grandmother get you a job that you didn't ask for. And so he wasn't liked, and his reign was marked with political instability and assassination plots. He was inexperienced, cavalier about his actions and personal life, and was seen by most discontented factions in the empire as a puppet for his mother and grandmother, who continued to exert control over his decisions throughout his rule.
Which is probably pretty easy, because I'm sure he didn't want to make decisions, so he'd be like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I want to fucking party right.
Although it's mind-boggling to me that like an actual emperor that wanted to be emperor could be assassinated and replaced so easily. And then this guy that seems like he'd be the easiest mark in the world, because if you party and stuff all the time, it should be very simple to like get somebody in there to...
Well, hold on to your hats.
Yeah.
Because, remember, he got crowned in 218. He's relatively, as a ruler, just getting started. Lost my spots. Boo. Skip to the end. No. So, as we touched on before in a previous podcast, all the shocking stories of conduct are mostly how you sell the public on assassinations and revolts. But what really lights the fuse for them are external threats to the country and economic instability. Mm-hmm. In just 4 years since they had defeated Meritus, Rome was in a bad place, and military forces were ready to take it out on the new emperor's ass. In 222 AD, Elagabalus' grandmother sensed that her family's position was in danger and convinced the emperor to adopt his cousin, the 13-year-old Alexander Severus, to be his heir.
Well, we know they're going to kill you. We got to set up the next...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alexander was more acceptable and traditional for the role of emperor, and the hope was that with him in place to follow Elagabalus, the discontented factions of the empire would be appeased, and the family would be safe from assassination plots. But as you kind of just touched on, the Praetorian Guard, with this announcement, kind of just saw it as an opportunity to kill Elagabalus and move on to the next guy.
Right.
Elagabalus had plotted to kill Alexander originally, but his grandmother thwarted these attempts. Instead, Elagabalus decided to bring Alexander with him to the Praetorian camp to try to calm the soldiers, who were now pissed when they learned he had tried to murder the new heir to the throne. Needless to say, he did not calm them down. So, long before this, Syrian priests had prophesied that Elagabalus would die a violent death, and the emperor put a lot of measures in place to make sure this didn't happen, or at least not as badly and violently as it could. The Historia Augusta documented these measures as such. The prophecy had been made to him by some Syrian priest that he would die a violent death, and so he had prepared cords entwined with purple and scarlet silk, in order that, if need arose, he could put an end to his life by the noose. He had gold swords, too, in readiness with which to stab himself should any violence impend. He also
I like that the swords aren't to try to fight whoever's attacking him. No. It's like, I'm going to kill you. It's like, not before I do.
Bullet the fuck you are. He also had poisons ready in Seronites, or Belemnite, which I guess is a kind of squid, and sapphires and emeralds with which to kill himself if destruction threatened. He also built a very high tower from which to throw himself down. And so I guess it was like push the
We're gonna kill you. Hold on, let me
run for the tower.
Yeah, let me climb up here first.
He constructed.
I'm really hoping the ending of the story is he's the first and only emperor to ever be killed by somebody jumping out and yelling "boo."
Yeah.
It's like, no.
So he also built a very high tower from which to throw himself down, constructed of boards gilded and jeweled in his own presence, for even in his death, he declared, should be costly and marked by luxury, in order that it might be said that no one had ever died in this fashion. So I respect that. Yeah. But all these preparations availed him nothing, for, as we have said, he was slain by common soldiers. So he just went to the camp and they beat the fuck out of him.
Yeah, so right there, like when he went, yeah, not even really a plot. They're just like, fuck this guy.
No, this idiot's really going to come up to us after the shit he pulled. His mother and close collaborators were also slain, and the former emperor's corpse was dragged throughout the city to be abused and mutilated, and then thrown into the public sewer that flowed into the Tiber River. So what's kind of weird about Elagabalus' reign is that it kind of gets lumped in with that of Caligula and Nero for, like, wickedness and cruelty. And I don't totally get that vibe from it.
No, it sounds like he was more, like, negligent and we've, I'm trying to think. I did a story way back, I think when we were still doing 2 topics per episode, about an emperor. I think it might have been in China though, that like built a lake filled with wine and that kind of thing. There's been a lot of rulers that once they get their money, all they care about is like orgies and parties and living up the high life, and it goes great when the country is doing well, but what happens is the country never continues to do well because the person that's supposed to be right, and the person right, and you haven't done any job of your job to like ensure future money comes in, and they tend to be looked at almost like even less favorably than the Caligulas and the bloodthirsty ones, because it's like, well, those people were just psychopaths. These people were fuckers that like only cared about themselves. I don't know.
I mean, it kind of depends how truthful the like human sacrifice stories are, because some of the stuff they talked about in those narratives are pretty barbaric. Like they talk about him throwing snakes onto like people and locking them in a room. And like I said, it's not unheard of for somebody to be that evil of a piece of shit, but it's all kind of just, those narratives come about at a really convenient time. So like, was he a good emperor? Fuck no. But he seemed more just like chaotic and eccentric. Yeah.
I say, and people exaggerate. Maybe he threw a snake on one person once, and now they're like, "That's a thing he does."
Yeah,
like,
just to learn.
He only murdered the one person. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me, and then we still see it. Although I feel more and more we're in a society where these people do get away with this kind of behavior, and it just goes on, and there's never any consequences to it. But especially back then, I mean, you would have to have completely ignored all of human history to be like, this is how I'm going to live my life, and it's going to go great. Yeah. It's like, although there can be other things there too. They have different, the same kind of mental things that we struggle with, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show. Like, they very well could know that, like, yeah, I'm going to live like this, and they're going to assassinate me within a year, but I don't really care about getting killed. I'm just going to live it up while I can. So, I mean, maybe it's some of that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then a lot of these people, especially, you said he was raised as a kid, like his whole life, given these things handed to him and like groomed for these positions. There's a lot of that too, that I'm just better than I'm above all that.
Yeah. I mean,
stuff.
And you've only known your weird fucking religious party way of life. So, like, you can't expect somebody to, like... So, like, I think he died at 18. Like,
well, yeah, and that's kind of something I was going to mention, too, because when they named had him adopt his, you said cousin, I think it was,
yeah.
And they're like, well, he's 13 and better suited for it. It's like, why the fuck are these places insisting on letting... naming 13-year-olds supreme ruler of... But I know why it is. It's exactly what you said. It's because they know the parents want to rule or the grandparents want to rule, and they know if a 13-year-old's on the seat, they're not fucking ruling.
Yeah.
Although I do always get a kick out of... you saw this a lot in Egypt, too, but I'm sure in Rome, where they're like, we're going to make the 13-year-old so we can use them as a puppet. And the first thing the 13-year-old does is like have their parents assassinated because they're like, fuck you, you're not controlling me. So that's always fun. I don't know. I'd like to say it was a different world back then, and I don't really know how different it is now.
It's like we've traded it to like now you have like a 40-year-old puppet figure, and then you have like 80-year-old men like controlling them in the background. So yeah.
So that was Argonian, Leviticus, Cornholio,
Badonius, Buconius, Maximus, Decimus, Meridius.
I mean, I think he said his dad or somebody in that chain somewhere. I mean, this started like a Bible chapter where they're like, but Sextus, I thought was his dad's name. So it's like, no wonder he grew up to be like, just care about orgies and parties. Like his dad invented them.
Big Sexy, they called him. Big Sexy and the Little Sexy.
Big Sexy, coincidentally, he was killed by
and coincidentally, Little Sexy had a lot more sex than Big Sexy.
Yeah, but Big Sexy's sex was larger.
It was larger. Yeah, he fucked
less quantity, just bigger.
He fucked a volcano. He fucked the volcano that ended the world.
Well, I mean, this guy's aspirations were to die a way that nobody else had. That could have been...
Mm-hmm.
Like, why wasn't that in his repertoire? But I did like that all the measures that he... It's like, those only work, like, if the person that's going to kill you gives you a second.
Yeah.
Like...
I think, like, probably in his head, like, it would be like a rebellion or something, charge the gates, or...
Yeah, he's up in his room and he can hear the doors being kicked in, and...
Yeah.
I kind of wish he did get a chance to flee to his tower and jump off of it.
I would love if he built that elaborate tower and he didn't die from the fall.
I was going to say his elaborate robes, like he ends up parachuting down right into the angry mob.
Tower made of jewels and gold, and he just lands really hard and breaks his ankles.
He stays conscious just long enough to hear somebody say, "Hey, he's over there." Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
But
all right, that's it.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just jealous because I've never been important enough to need contingency plans for angry mobs.
You don't have.
I don't carry cyanide pills. No.
Oh, I do. No. My house is like a fucking Home Alone movie. I just have like a bunch of like paint cans attached to strings to hopefully give me enough brain damage I won't feel the threat.
I meant to off myself. I've got a million contingency plans in my head for like how to, like, I'm the idiot that like can't fight for shit. I'm 5'6". I'm not imposing at all, but I feel like I can like step up to any challenge. Yeah. Like, not that I'd win any fight, but it's like, yeah, if somebody tried to kill me, I'd fight them. And it's like, no, I wouldn't. I'd cower in the corner probably, but I wish I was there for the conversation when he had the gold swords made. He's like, this guy prophesized that I was going to be attacked violently, so I need 2 swords. Like, all right, to fight off the attackers? Like, no, to kill myself.
No.
It's like, but you've got 2 swords.
2 swords? It's like, I'm going to fucking behead myself with like...
Yeah, like scissors. Like, yeah.
I've regressed like mentally to the point where like I haven't watched South Park since I was a kid, and now I've been rewatching it. And there's an episode where they like go to some expert about like homeless people, and they treat it like a zombie apocalypse. And he's like, the expert's like, at the end, he's like, sorry to take the easy way out. And he like shoots himself in the head. And he's like, oh, fuck. And like he shoots himself like 8 more times and just won't die. And that's what I'm imagining for our boy here.
Yeah.
Just a million plans, none of them as effective as just a group of really angry Roman soldiers.
By soldiers, yeah. Yeah, I mean, It does seem to indicate that he was quite out of touch. Be like, look, these soldiers that we already suspect want me dead. I gotta go calm them down in person.
Calm down and look how pretty I look.
Yeah.
Yes. And it doesn't mention what Alexander.
Yeah, like
what did he just sort of watch? It's just like okay, well, I guess I'm in charge now.
Well, what happened is he was standing there and just like kind of shocked, but just watching as they like beat this guy to death. That I already can't remember his name because it was. But anyway, and then they turned and like looked at him, and he like was like he walked over and he just like gave him the corpse like one swift kick to like show that he is on their side, and they're like, yeah.
He was like, hey, cool gold swords.
One of us. One of us.
Gold swords. I can use these on my enemies. And the crowd roared.
And then a year later, they had him assassinated because it turns out a 13-year-old wasn't fit to rule either. But
all right. So yeah, that's the show this week. Thank you for listening.